Well, Happy New Year, everyone. If I can still say that, I'll probably be saying that for the next couple of days. And welcome to day four of Thriving in the Face of Cancer. I'm your host, Chef AJ, and every day for the next 27 days, I'll be talking to top doctors and other healthcare professionals, as well as people who have survived cancer, who will be giving you insights on how you too can thrive, even in the face of cancer. Today's guest is not only a plant-based oncologist, but the survivor of both cancer, stage 4 cancer, and a heart transplant, who is now running marathons and inspiring people worldwide. She practices integrative oncology as well as lifestyle medicine at the Mayo Clinic, with a special emphasis and focus on breast cancer. Please welcome to the show, Dr. Dawn Mussallem. Hi there. Thank you so much for being here.
Good morning. Thank you so much, Chef AJ, for having me here. You know how much this means to me. I adore you, and I just feel so privileged to be here, to be on this journey with you, as well as your listeners.
Well, I am privileged to know you because you are one of the first persons, or definitely the first oncologist I talked to after being diagnosed with cancer, because I could not get an oncologist at my local hospital for a year and a half. And I was so lucky that I heard about you from Jessica Kroc from Croc's in the Kitchen. She will be on the show with Brian. Now they both have had cancer diagnoses, and she told me about you. And just when she said a plant-based oncologist, I'm like, I'm going to her. And I had a session. You couldn't be more lovely, supportive, optimistic too. You know what's different about you, Dr. Dawn, is I've seen, in addition to you, I think I've seen four oncologists now. And for the most part, it's kind of like going to the Grim Reaper, you know? It's what I see. Like they're carrying their little thing in their black coats, but you're not like that at all. And I think maybe it's because of what you went through.
Well, thank you. And, I remember it all too closely in my own journey, Chef AJ. And, my specialty is really integrative oncology and lifestyle medicine, where I'm not a traditional oncologist. I actually went to naturopathic school before I went to traditional medical school. And that really informed the current science that I'm able to practice, to really be there in a holistic scope of practice for my patients. What really enlightens me and encourages me and gives me so much hope, and really almost it moves me beyond hope to knowing for my patients, especially nowadays with the modern advances of traditional therapies we have, is to really embark upon this optimization of self-care, particularly that with the whole food plant-based nutrition. It just really sets the stage for improved cancer outcomes. I see my own patients attaining their vitality during chemotherapy, radiation, surgery, and able to flourish well beyond and after. And I see such impressive outcomes. We know that we have research that supports this finding and this knowing, but it's very hard to get a lot of these studies off the ground. They're very expensive studies. It's hard to do the science in the way that it needs to be done effectively, to prove to a lot of the more allopathic community that the role of whole food plant-based nutrition can move the needle forward. But we know this, particularly with, as we were talking before the show started, with immunotherapy. So there's so much importance for anyone out there, whether you have never had cancer or whether you're at a high risk of cancer, whether you have cancer, to really lean into your nutrition. And particularly those cancer patients on chemo immunotherapy, this whole food plant-based nutrition is really, really important.
Yeah, absolutely. When did you become whole food plant-based? Was it before or after your diagnosis?
That's such a wonderful question. And I am really blessed that my family really was healthy from the time I was a little girl. And this is really what set the stage for me to want to become initially a naturopathic physician, or a physician that would really look at holistic modalities of healing that were set on a foundation of lifestyle, that of more nutritional patterns. And so I was raised in this whole food plant predominant. We weren't vegan, but we were whole food plant predominant. And then in junior high, about seventh grade, is when I became vegan/vegetarian. I would have a little bit of dairy products, and that carried all the way through up until after college. My undergraduate study at The Ohio State University was exercise physiology and nutrition. I went on to do research studying centenarians and how centenarians could help to maintain and optimize muscle mass into that longevity realm at the Cooper Institute for Aerobics Research. And around that time, I got really interested in fitness contests. And I had been doing really well in my fitness contest as a whole food plant only individual. And I continued to win. And then I was going to go to a big competition. And I had this personal trainer get in my head. And he said, you know, if you're going to win the big stage, you need to start doing animal protein. So I did. So I started shifting my diet. This was about 1997. And, you know, as you shared early on, I have this history of stage 4 cancer. And I've talked to Dr. T. Colin Campbell about this. And he really believes that was my trigger to my cancer. You know, who knows when the cancer cells in my body started steady stage. And I've had people say, well, wait a minute, you're certainly not very inspiring. You know, here you say you live this healthy lifestyle your whole life and you get cancer. That makes me not want to necessarily be healthy. And what I would say is, oh my goodness, if my parents did not instill this healthy lifestyle my whole childhood, I would not be alive today. And I would not have attained my vitality the way I did during and after my cancer treatment. You know, so it's so very important. But yeah, I had this little blip of time, you know, when I was doing these fitness contests that I was leaning in heavy on animal protein. And they do believe that was probably the trigger to my cancer. I had a stage 4 non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And you know, I've had a lot of people scrutinize my story as to, well, how did you get cancer then? And as a little girl, I would play in the creek. I grew up in the country and I would spend hours in the creek. All summer long, I would spend hours in the creek playing. And this was a runoff from agriculture fields. And so it was likely I was exposed to herbicides, possibly even glyphosate is what the suspicion is. Who knows? I don't really need an understanding of why I got cancer. Cancer for me was the biggest teacher of life. I would personally never trade that in. It taught me the preciousness of my aliveness. It made me such a more effective doctor today for the journey I went through, as challenging as that was. It just provided me with such wisdom and a direct connection to the divine and to my deep belief in God and that spirituality realm. And I mean, there's nothing more beautiful than to be able to connect with a patient who's scared of dying, to let them know that though our journeys are all different and unique to each of us, I myself have faced that same fear, if you may. Once it was a fear. Now, I mean, I just think it's like memento mori. We have to remember our death. You know, it's just, we're on earth and it's something we all have in common. And my story has been so enriched with a lot of this healthcare adversity. And I know we'll probably talk a little bit about my story, and I'm happy to do it kind of sequentially. But following my cancer diagnosis, there was more substantial experiences with death that I did experience. And I'll just be quiet there for a minute. You may have a question for me.
Well, you know, I was thinking that what you said is something I felt too. Like, what did I do to cause my cancer? And there's so much blame. You know, one of the things that I'm so passionate about, and I'm going to feature many different survivors on my channel. As a matter of fact, I'm switching my focus completely to survivorship and to helping people thrive in the face of cancer. But particularly with the type I have, lung cancer, it is the most stigmatized cancer because, you know, I remember when I was telling people, the first thing they say is, did you smoke? And the thing is yes, smoking, many people that smoke got lung cancer, but there's at least 20%, and the numbers are growing, of young people, with lung cancer that have never ever smoked. So it's completely underfunded. But I heard you say about how your family ate very healthfully, maybe not full vegan, and yet, well, what did I do? Why did this happen to me? And I find it so much in the cancer space, the self-blame and sometimes the other blame as well.
You know, that's exactly right. And it's just, I really believe, and I have strong faith in my life. I was raised Roman Catholic. You know, I would say that I don't know the formalities of my religion as much as I would love to and like to, but I have such deep belief in God that it really is what kept me. Oh, yeah, beautiful. I do the rosary every day. I love to do the
Somebody,
rosary.
I'm
I
getting
love
so
that.
many. I don't know what religion I actually am, but I am just a woman of faith now, and I'm getting so many beautiful gifts. And this was blessed by a priest, and I just love this.
I love that you have that with you.
Yeah.
And you know, and it's just belief in something bigger than yourself. And I had dinner with a beautiful friend last night, and she said something very lovely. It was actually wisdom that the Dalai Lama had shared with her. And what he had shared with her is keep the faith of your great grandmother. I love that. I mean, I just believe in being authentic to you, being authentic to your roots, you know? And so for me, having that faith and belief in God just really is what gave me the power and strength in knowing that this cancer diagnosis, and then later, you know, in life when I developed after my cancer treatment, my heart failure issues, even that adversity with heart failure, that this is what my life was supposed to be about. It's okay. I can't change it. You know, acceptance, grace over what's given to us and our challenges. You know, our challenges is kind of like exercise. Like in order to build a muscle, you know, you have to kind of cause little micro tears and traumas to that muscle to get stronger. It's the same thing in life. Our traumas, those little micro traumas, big traumas, whatever they are, that is our springboard to growth. And just the embrace of the preciousness of life. I mean, oh my gosh, I have chills saying that. I love the essence of my life so much. And that love of life, of self, of others never would be so deeply ingrained in me if I didn't go through some of the, what maybe we can call suffering. I mean, I guess it was in a way suffering, but it heightened my existence to this blissful place that is just so very special. And if my life on earth is 1/3 of what it could have been without some of these illnesses, or 1/2, well, so be it. My life is so much more fruitful as a result of some of those experiences, I would say.
So you got your diagnosis, if I remember correctly, while you had, right when you had just started medical school. I think you were 4 months into medical school. But do you think that without your experience, you would have particularly become an oncologist?
You know, it's so interesting. So when I actually went to medical school, my intention, because I went to osteopathic school, I still wanted to do more holistic forms of healing, as I wanted to do cranial sacral therapy for children that were really struggling with epilepsy and for individuals with neurological sequelae. And then as you go through medical school, your ideas and you know what you're going to do keeps on changing and changing. And then that I wanted to be an oncologist, but because I had had ongoing health issues after my cancer diagnosis, it was a little hard for me to commit to that training schedule. So I ended up doing, you know, general medicine out of my residency. And I actually was a hospital physician at Mayo Clinic. And I loved doing hospital medicine. I loved being a hospital physician. And then I continued to get more unwell from some of my heart aspects. That is when I transitioned my practice into the integrative oncology realm for breast cancer patients. So I never practiced traditional oncology. I've always been in the integrative oncology realm and the lifestyle medicine realm. I became board certified in lifestyle medicine shortly after that time, because what I was learning was, wait a minute, a lot of patients want to come in to see me. And I struggled with the same thing during naturopathic school. Everyone wanted a magic bullet, you know, and it's not about that. It's about going back to the basics. Let's analyze our lifestyle. And it's not just about the diet either. You know, quite frankly, I have some people come in to see me and they're eating the perfect diet, and the rest of their lifestyle is completely a mess. They're so turbulent. You know, some people come in and they're doing this perfect whole food plant-based nutrition, but they're doing it out of fear of dying. And that's not what it should be about. It should be about eating that nutrition because you're nourishing your body. You're showing up for yourself because you love yourself. And this is the path to really attaining that vitality during your cancer diagnosis. That's what I found. And then certainly it's the path to flourishing after. But in addition to that healthy eating, you know, you have to move your body regularly, whether that's walking, whether that's gardening, whether that's dancing, whatever it is to you, just move. It doesn't matter to me, but I need my patients to move. Avoiding toxic substances. You know, you talked about the smoking. None of my patients smoke. Smoking just isn't something I have to really work on for my patients nowadays. I think most people know they shouldn't smoke. Alcohol is a big deal. You know, alcohol is a carcinogen. The Surgeon General yesterday just released that it is the third leading cause of death in our country, so we have to be mindful of the toxic exposure that alcohol introduces us to. I don't think that people have to totally abstain from alcohol if they want to have a little bit in terms of social connections. We know that loneliness is definitely an epidemic nowadays, and loneliness is such a driver of disease and suffering, if you may. With social connections are critical. And so I think a lot of people, when we look at longevity studies in alcohol, it gets a little bit confusing because we look at the blue zones and alcohol is actually part of that. But in the blue zones, they're not drinking alone and they're not drinking to excess. They're just having a few sips in conjunction with loving, harmonious relationships, but I don't think you need alcohol to have social connections. I guess the other pillars of lifestyle medicine that we would always want to also certainly give a shout out to would be sleep. You need to sleep. You really need to get that 7 to 9 hours of sleep a night. And then how we manage our stress. Cancer is stressful. It's so stressful, but how are we going to manage that stress? How are we going to meet it? And I guess I would say it comes back to that aspect of acceptance. Trying to just trust and not fight it is so important. It's like riding the wave. If you stand there so rich and the wave comes at you, it's going to knock you over. But if you kind of just go with the flow and just try to trust the process, it's not going to be easy, but it's going to be easier than if you fight it. And I think that's the biggest wisdom I try to give to patients is just try to find the grace. I think that's such a beautiful word.
Yeah, well, thank you. Do you want to share a bit of your story? Because you have been on the show before, but it's been a couple of years, and I know that we have new viewers all the time.
Absolutely. I'm trying to think of maybe where the best place for us to start because we kind of covered some of this. I think we can start here. Let me share my screen. Let me get you back, actually. Just happened.
Don't worry about it.
The technology, it's so wonderful. Right?
Did you always have, you have such a positive attitude. Was it always like that? Or did your near-death experience and cancer and heart transplant, did that really make life more precious every day, as you said?
I think that's a good question, AJ. And I mean, I think I'm so gifted. I came from a family that gave me deep love. And I think this is so important, and my mom shares a beautiful story that she remembers the day I was conceived. She said she remembers just this joy and elation. And epigenetically, everything starts when we're in our mother's womb. And I really believe that my joy started at that moment. I was born onto this earth a very happy person. I am just so blessed to have been given the family I was given and to have that harmony during my childhood. We had a very simple family. We weren't wealthy. It was a very simple family, but a lot of love. My parents were very hard on me. They really pushed hard, so to this day, I kind of sometimes feel like I'm never quite enough. I always want to kind of do better, but I think that's healthy too, right? It helps to keep the ego in the back seat, if you may, keeps us working hard. But I was always just very happy. So I think I'm one of these just very fortunate people in that regard. It comes a little bit easier to me. And that's where I would say, my journey may seem like, man, how did she get it through it so easy? Why am I struggling? We should never compare our journeys to another, because I think I was given this gift because I had such a secure childhood. And I think that childhood trauma speaks a lot to our resilience later in life. I also think biologically, there may be an element of resilience that we're just given, from the grace of God at the time we're born. So I think I've just been really, really fortunate to have been given that luxury of having a little easier path, perhaps. I would love to share this, though. You asked if I would be willing to share maybe a few slides. So let me see if I can make this work, because I know once we get into this mode, it gets a little bit more challenging, but I think I can do it. I'm going to outsmart the system. I did it when we were on the other thing. So let's see. I think I got it, but I think you're still on the wrong screen. So let me make sure I get you on the right screen. Let's do that.
I see a long staircase.
So this is really cool. So this date is the most profound moment of my life, maybe the second most profound moment. I think I have three really significant moments in my life. This was September 22nd, 2016. And this was 1 year after I successfully completed the launch of the Integrative Medicine and Breast Health program at Mayo Clinic. And it was a very successful program. And so I was given the opportunity after my morning clinic patients to present to hospital leaders about the success of the program, with the anticipation that I would be able to grow this program institutional wide for all patients, not just breast cancer patients. So I love my time with patients. And if any of my patients are listening, I'm always late. And Mayo Clinic is so amazing. They give me 90 minutes with my new patients because they know the power and the importance of us being in that space with patients, their time of vulnerability, to help advise that patient towards this path of wellness. So they really honor and respect what I do with my patients. And they give me the time to do it right. And so I'm always late, even though I have 90 minutes. Once you open up a lifetime, it takes a lot of time to get through that. So I was late to this meeting. And so I remember getting to the top of these steps because I had spent so much time with my morning patients, like, oh my goodness, I need to get to this important meeting. I get to the top of these steps and my legs felt really, really weak. They were quivering. And so I remember kind of thinking to myself, are you nervous? And I thought, you're not, I don't usually get nervous. I usually get so excited to engage with people. So I continued down the stairs and I felt like my legs were going to give out. And I knew I just didn't have time for this. But as a doctor, I think all of us, doctor or not, you go through in your mind, I'm thinking, did I eat breakfast? Did I sleep enough? Did I have too much caffeine? Like, what's going on? I felt so unwell. I almost felt nauseated. I got to the bottom of the stairs and I really thought that I was going to collapse, but I knew I had to get to the boardroom because I needed to be there for this important presentation. I got to the boardroom and I could barely open this heavy door. And as I'm trying to open this heavy door, someone on the other end pushes the door open and they were kind of like hastily, like, we've been waiting for you. I'm like, oh yeah, I know. And so as I open the door, people are pretty formal at Mayo Clinic. Everyone's in these suits. They're around this table. And usually when I would walk into a big room like this, I would kind of say something lighthearted to break the energy of that room and just to kind of like bring the love. That's what I'm trying to do. And I knew on this day, I just had to stay on task. So I took the seat at the head of the table where they had my designated seat. There was a screen at the opposite end of the room where I would share my slides, and the mouse was to the right side of me. I don't know if any of you have ever taken a mouse and you're trying to control a cursor at like a distant screen. And so I'm trying to control this cursor, right? And as I'm trying to control the cursor, it's like the efforts of my hand on that mouse could not control the cursor. It's like I was losing all ability of coordination. And then as I continued to try to move the cursor, it started to get more faded and more faded. And that was actually my last conscious memory. And that was in 2016. So I'm going to just take you just a little bit to my backstory. I started to share that with you a little bit, but this was actually really cute. And, Chef AJ, I had shared this with you as a little girl. When people would say, like 5 years old, what do you want to be when you grow up? I would say, oh, I want to be in a Smucker's jar. And they would look at my parents like, okay, good luck with her, right? And what I meant by that is I really wanted to live to be 100 years old. I was at a young age, just intrigued by vitality. It just really ignited my curiosity. Like, what is this all about? And where I got this from was a Willard Scott Today Show. They would honor 100th birthday celebrations with these very vital people. And I just thought that was so fascinating. So at a young age, I set out to be healthy. Like, I loved going to the health food store with my parents. When some kids would say, oh, my favorite childhood memory was Disney, I will to this day say my favorite childhood memory was going to the health food store with my father. And back in the olden days, this is like in the 1970s, you would open the freezer section and that's where they kept all the grains. And oh my gosh, the aroma of the oatmeal and the fresh cut wheat. And I just loved it. And, we did a little bit of dairy. So there was this yogurt called Altadena yogurt. And I would love having the fresh oats put in my Altadena yogurt. And that was my favorite snack as a kid, that and spirulina bars and Ezekiel bread. Love this stuff, right? And this is my favorite childhood memory. So I would tell people I wanted to be in a Smucker's jar. So of course, fast forward, I went on to the Ohio State University. I studied nutrition and exercise physiology. And that's what took me to the Cooper Institute to do that research in centenarians who were 100-year-olds still keeping up their exercise capacity. And so my research was really staged around how did these individuals keep up their exercise capacity? How could we help for them to attain their muscle? And what were the proper biomechanics to maintain that muscle mass? And also did a little bit of research with NASA at that time, because that's a situation when you're in anti-gravitational environments that it's very hard to keep your bone density and muscle strength up. So I had a really exciting job after my undergraduate training, but I knew at the Cooper Institute that I wanted to eventually go to medical school. So I went on to naturopathic school first. And then from there, I wanted to get additional training, and that took me to osteopathic school. I only applied to one medical school. I was very specific about what I wanted to do. I knew I still wanted to lean in more on holistic forms of medicine. And the osteopathic school in Arizona had a very rich nutrition program. And so I wanted that to be part of my medical training. So I went to the osteopathic school in Arizona. In a few weeks in a medical school, I started not to feel good. I was very athletic my whole life. As I shared with you, I did these fitness contests. I was a runner. I climbed mountains once or twice a day. I would do Camelback Mountain in Arizona leading up to medical school. So I saw a doctor because I was feeling a little shortness of breath and winded when I would do Camelback Mountain. And he said, well, I think you have adult asthma. Here's an inhaler. He never listened to me. I didn't get better. I saw another doctor. He said, use it more. So I started using the inhaler more. My heart starts racing, right? I see a third doctor. This is now, just like you said, about 3-4 months into medical school. And the doctor said, this is in your head. This is something that happens to all medical students. Psychosomatic. Can you imagine? I mean, I'm like beating myself up over this time. Like, God, what's wrong with you? Strengthen up, toughen up, girl. That kind of a thing. So I'm going home from medical school shortly after this visit, and I collapse. I'm taken in the emergency room, and this is my chest x-ray. So as you can see here, like that is not normal. Like where all that white was a malignant pleural effusion. They took me to the operating room urgently. I was in cardiogenic shock. There was a 16-centimeter mass in my chest that was compressing my heart. It had collapsed my left lung, and it was pushing down on my great vessels in my neck. And so I wasn't getting proper perfusion to my brain, and my heart was not able to sustain life. So they had to take me to the urgent operation, where they pulled the tumor off the major neck veins. They took a pathology report of the tumor. And I remember waking up from the surgery. This was in 2000, Thanksgiving weekend, actually. So 24 years ago. And when I woke up, there was a young woman from my medical school that I had recognized crying over my bed. And I remember I felt this need to console her, like, oh my gosh, it's okay, So the next morning they came into my room, and it was the on-call team, because again, this is Thanksgiving. And they said, we have some news to share with you. You have a diffuse large B-cell lymphoma. Based on the imaging, it's stage 4 cancer. Without treatment, you have 3 months to live. With treatment, you have about 20 months to live. This was back in 2000. We need to start chemotherapy right away. You're going to need to drop out of medical school, and you won't be able to have children because we don't have time for fertility preservation. And so it was just like the carpet was pulled out from underneath me. What happened? My dad was to the side of the bed with me, and here he's thinking like, wait a minute, like we did everything right. What is going on? Like, how is this possible? All these questions like flood through your mind. We're going to lose our little girl, the little girl that we tried so hard to give like the healthiest life possible that we knew of. So you just learn to accept. It was so hard. And I knew I wasn't going to quit medical school because that was my purpose. That was what I set out to do. I love people, and I really wanted to help humanity be able to achieve the level of vitality that I had been able to achieve my whole life. And there was no better time for me to really lean into my studies than now. And that's exactly what I did. So I let the medical team know that I was going to stay in school, and that, okay, let's start the treatment. And it was really quite a blessing that I went through naturopathic school and had this additional training and had this nutrition training for my undergraduate throughout to the time I was in my training at osteopathic school, because I really leaned in on those principles of lifestyle, predominantly that of whole food plant-based nutrition. And, with a lot of chemotherapies, medical establishments still to this day will say, oh, no, you can't do raw vegetables and fruits, no salads, no this, no that. We know now that that's not accurate. You are fine if you're having chemotherapy to have raw vegetables and fruits, as long as you're doing it in your home and you're washing them adequately, triple wash them. I would not recommend that if a patient's going through chemotherapy that they're eating raw vegetables and fruits at a restaurant. You should totally avoid that because you likely will be exposed. You don't want to do cut up vegetables and fruits from a deli or get fruit bowls and stuff like that. You need to do the fresh vegetables and fruits at your home. So please be careful, and you're always going to be safer to cook your vegetables and fruits if you are concerned, and please listen to your own medical team. But if your medical team is telling you that you cannot do fresh vegetables and fruits, then the current guidelines, they just need to pull up and review, because it's no longer recommended that we recommend neutropenic diets to patients undergoing chemotherapy. So it's a very important guideline that all oncologists need to be aware of, but some just haven't been able to read some of that data. There's a lot of information that comes out there, so when it comes to medicine, they can't know it all. And so I know patients, that's my position and my passion. And thank you, Chef AJ, for having me here today, because it helps me to spread some of this evidence and information so doctors are more informed of what is right for their patients, so that they can know their patients are safe to have these vegetables and fruits. So anyways, back to the story. I went on to do chemotherapy, many months of chemotherapy. I had to do a bone marrow transplant. And I remember for my bone marrow transplant, back then you're kind of the girl in the bubble. And I do these images with Dolly 3. This is a AI generated tool that you can do for free. And it creates these images so you don't have copyright infringement, but it's kind of interesting when you put these comments in there and it gives you this cool image. And this is what it gave me, kind of interesting. And my oncologist is very special. It was through the City of Hope for my bone marrow transplant. His name was Dr. Jeffrey Schreiber. And he knew how important fitness was for me. And so he had a bicycle in my hospital room. I was there for many, many weeks. And he also had one out by the nurses' station. And he said, Dawn, I know you're going to wake up every morning to study early, which I did. This is a shout out to patients. Keep your schedule regular. I never succumbed to my disease. The disease was not going to redefine me. So I still set my alarm every day at 4 a.m. in the hospital during my bone marrow transplant. They would come and do my labs. I would put my clothes on that I could walk out into the hallway, and I would go ride the bike before the other patients would wake up. I would go back into my room, by 5:15 a.m. I would study. They would bring my breakfast. I just kept everything as normal as possible the entire time during my bone marrow transplant. But what this picture was all about for me was, I remember looking out and seeing all the other patients dying in an effort to stay alive. But I attained my vitality without pause. And this was a picture of me actually during my bone marrow transplant before I got my cells back. And, I don't remember really feeling sick. I just don't. I was sick. The picture shows it here. I was very sick. But internally, I just felt like this illuminated light of just energy. And I felt very, very revitalized the entire time. So the cancer was cured. After my bone marrow transplant, I went on to do 2 months of radiation therapy, and the stage 4 cancer was cured. A few years later, my husband and I found out the miracle of growing our family. I was pregnant. And in May of 2003, I gave birth to my daughter, Sophia. So they were wrong about that too. Unfortunately, a few weeks after my daughter was born, I started not to feel well though. And so I got so unwell. It was very similar actually to what my symptoms were when I was diagnosed with my cancer. And so they took me to the emergency room. I was again actually in cardiogenic shock, but this time they found that I was in advanced heart failure. My heart had been damaged severely from all the radiation and the chemotherapy they had given me. We knew this was a possibility. Again, the stage 4 cancer was a cancer that was very incurable back then. This was before the monoclonal antibody rituximab. This was when they only could rely on chemotherapy for these very advanced, aggressive lymphomas. And the majority of patients never survived. And so the bone marrow transplant they offered me was a life-saving therapy that cured my cancer, and I'm here today. But there was some collateral damage along the way, and there really was no way around that. And so now we had the second problem we had to encounter. And so this was very, very challenging. And this is when I became a patient at Mayo Clinic. And Mayo Clinic just filled my heart with hope. They said, Dawn, we're going to start with medicines. And when the medicines don't work, there's going to be procedures we're going to have to do. And when those don't work, there may at some point be a heart transplant you're going to need. But for now, we're going to start with the medicines. We're going to get you better. You're going to do cardiac rehab. And that's exactly what they did. They got me strong enough that I was able to go back to my residency training at Mayo Clinic. And so this was from 2003. From 2003 all the way up until 2007, I did really, really good with my residency training. And then the hardest thing actually in my life happened right around this time. And so in 2008, we have a very strong, loving family. And in 2008, I remember this day very, very significantly. We would always go out to dinner with my family, and on the weekends it would be a big dinner, like multi-generational dinner with 20, 30 members of the family. And after this Friday night dinner, my husband said, honey, just go sleep with the baby. Sophie was 4 at the time. I'm going to go to bed. And so I said, all right. So the next morning I woke up and 4 a.m., my household, I would wake up at 4 a.m. My husband would wake up at 4 a.m. Sophia usually get up at 5 a.m. That's just how we were. I woke up at 4 and the house was still quiet. He was still sleeping. I thought, yeah, maybe he's just not feeling well. He needs his rest. Sophia wakes up, later on, she finally says, Mom, where's Dad? And I thought, I'm not sure. He's still resting, honey. It's okay. Another hour goes by. He's like, Mom, where's Dad? And so I said, well, I'm going to go get him up. So I went into his room, and my husband had actually passed away in his sleep unexpectedly. And that for me has been the hardest part of my journey. And the part of my journey, at some point I will write a book, but it's still the part of my journey that I still don't yet understand. I don't have answers. And I look so deeply for answers at the time. It was so difficult. It's so easy being a patient, but loss is so hard. And it's just, if we're awake to this transformative power of loss or suffering or grief, pain, trauma, whatever it is, you can really move beyond this hardship and transcend all of that and come out into this life of renewal. And it's just, this awakened life is an inspired life. And what I really learned from this is that this grief is really the persistence of love. And that to me is so beautiful, that concept of, why am I so sad? And the reason I was so sad was because I had such deep love for my husband. And how beautiful is that? So I knew I had to get strong. My heart was actually very weak at the time, but I knew I had to get strong. And I love this. A mentor of mine, Dr. Amit Sood, he's written some beautiful books, the Mayo Clinic book of Happiness, the Mayo Clinic book called Stress Free. He has other books since that time. And he shared this quote with me that, Dawn, the heart keeps 5% of the blood for itself before it can serve the needs of the body. But to remember that 95% of the blood is pumping out to serve the rest of the body. And so we must do the same for ourselves in life, right? We've got to show up for ourselves, keep some for yourself. Take time to prepare that healthy nutrition. Take time to exercise. Make sure you get adequate sleep. Show up for yourself. But 95% of what we do needs to be that meaning and purpose of serving the needs of others. And that's really what my life was about. That's what gave me strength to continue to work, to stay in my residency, all during these healthcare adversities, because it was through that lens of love for humanity to serve the needs of others. And that's what really kept me going. So, that's kind of what took me to that boardroom. This is what this was all about. So I'm going to bring you back to that boardroom, that day when I was in the presentation and that cursor got light and I lost consciousness. So this near-death experience was a 4-minute near-death experience. I had a defibrillator in my chest that was not able to shock me effectively because I was actually in a flat line. So we have these rhythm strips that show this flat line, and it gives me chills to talk about it. And it still almost makes me shake when I think back to how that rhythm strip looked. But this ignited this full awakening, and it was just this embrace with a spiritual union of God. And how I describe this near-death experience is, it was complete acceptance of the total unknowing. I was enveloped in love, and it was as if the hands of God were just holding me. I had no desire to come back to life, and I could have remained there for the rest of my life and been very content. I lost sight of reality during this time. It's not that I'm sure it wasn't that I didn't want to be back on earth to be there for my daughter. She, of course, needed me. But it's just to let people know that this experience, at least for me, with death, was one of complete love and comfort and peace and harmony. And so within 4 minutes, I started to feel this huge wave of energy that came back through my body. And I was actually brought back to life. And the doctors don't feel that it was a defibrillator that brought me back to life. They're not quite sure because it didn't look like the defibrillator was actually able to shock one of the rhythms that would have effectively brought me back to life. But despite shock after shock and no return to life, I did come back to life. And I describe it as like this giant tsunami of energy that was what rushed back through my body. And when I came back to life, I just describe it as this electrifying energy. And it was like this mystic, miraculous, difficult to verbalize reality, this immense power. And following this time, the next few years were very, very challenging. I mean, I could hardly drive. I would drive and I would feel moments of me almost losing consciousness. So I had to stop driving. When I would examine patients, I would have to lean into the examination table just because it was so hard for me to stand up and examine a patient at the same time. My fingers would be blue while I would be examining patients. At the end of my workday, I could barely make it up the 2 steps to get to my car in the physician's parking garage. And so eventually I knew that I had to start working from home. They tried to do a few additional procedures. The last procedure they tried to do was in 2019, and that led to me having a stroke with loss of vision in my left eye. And so it was in 2019 that they listed me for heart transplantation. And I was on a list for a full year before a heart was found. And I started to decompensate to the point that my organs were no longer able to remain healthy because there wasn't enough perfusion to my organs. So they had to admit me to the hospital for supportive therapies to help my heart beat and help me get blood to the vital organs, my brain, my kidneys, and what. And so it was February 5th, 2021 that a matching heart was found. And, you know, it had been 18 years with heart failure. And you would think that you would be ready for a heart transplant, but you're not. And, you know, here someone else has to die to keep me alive. And there's a lot of psychology that happens in that moment. Your heart, you know, would I lose the memory of my beautiful, precious childhood, the memory of my husband who died, the memory of my dear daughter as a child? Would I lose these memories? You know, is a physical heart an emotional heart? You don't know, right? My transplant cardiologist then shared with me that my donor was an IV drug user with hepatitis C. So they knew that upon accepting this heart, even though I was actively dying, I would get hepatitis C. They reassured me they'd be able to treat it and I'd be cured of the hepatitis C, but it was one more obstacle I would have to go through after my transplant. So I remember going down for my heart transplantation and having eye contact with my surgeon, Dr. Sariapoglu, who's a dear friend of mine. And before every other surgery, I remember I would make the sign of the cross. I would pray, be like, oh my gosh, please make sure I'm alive. Please get me through the surgery. And this wasn't like this. This surgery was totally different. I like had knowing that within days I would wake up to the beat of a new heart. And this is my operation. This is me moments before they're ready to put the new heart into my body. It's just powerful. So after my transplant, I had a lot of complications because of all the radiation that I had had. They knew I was going to be one of the more complicated heart transplants that they've done. And so I actually hemorrhaged and they had to take me back to the operating room. And they didn't think I was going to survive actually after my heart transplant. And this is how sick I was. It's amazing, modern medicine. I've determined it's hard to die. Die. I think heaven didn't want me. They said, no, if we bring her to heaven, then she's going to make us all eat plants. And we don't want that. So they keep me down here on earth. It's never a really good thing. So anyways, after a few days, I woke up and I shared that there's been a few really remarkable moments in my life. I would say that first was giving birth to my daughter. The second was my near-death experience. And the third was certainly waking from heart transplant. And when I woke up from my heart transplant, my body was warm feeling for the first time in 18 years. And I remember I had total clarity of thought. And there was this really remarkable thing because I remember hearing the sound It was this harmonious, it was this beautiful sound. And I couldn't understand what it was. And it was the beating of my heart. My hair was actually brushing against the crisp white linen sheets in sync to that powerful beat of my new heart, creating this like harmonious sound. And every single cell in my body was oscillating this high vibrational frequency. I was alive. It was so amazing. And once you're up and they realize you're alive, they get you up right away. And so I will share with you, I do not tolerate narcotics. So I didn't use any narcotics during my recovery because they make me so sick and it's just not worth it to me. So there was tremendous suffering after my heart transplant. I was able to experience immense amounts of pain. I learned the power of moaning. That power of the hum is actually very soothing and is actually helps to palliate that pain in quite a remarkable way. But you could see the pain in my eyes. It was so challenging. And you're still hooked up. I was still really unwell at this point, very unstable. But this was me. And I remember I was like, oh, I'm going to try to smile. It was so hard. I was trying to put my thumbs up. And I was like, I don't know if I could really do it. So just amazing, the power of organ donation. I had a really amazing dream this exact night. And in this dream, I remember I woke up in this dwelling place and I didn't know where I was at. And it was like this concrete building. And I remember looking at this window and there was no car. And I was so confused. Where am I at? There was no chair. There was nothing. It was just this empty room. And there was a door. And I remember crawling out this door. And as I crawled out this door, there was these tall blades of grass. And these tall blades of grass, it kind of was like pulling me back. And I remember flipping over. And as I flipped over, there was huge clouds. This is a dream right after my transplant. These huge clouds. And this voice came over me in this dream that said, Grace. And I remember looking out into the distance in this dream. And this is exactly what I saw. This is the utopia. It was like the new world. It was this harmonious love and existence and people of nurturing each other and families. And I'm not really sure what this message is all about, but it was a beautiful message. So I woke up and I would always listen to instrumental music in the hospital. And the very song playing at that moment was titled Grace. So I couldn't sleep at that moment. So I opened up my email and the email waiting for me at that very moment of time was titled Full of Grace. And so I named my heart Grace. And so, grace is a virtue from God, and it's really a power and willingness that gives us power to do what we can never do on our own, And so it's just really been such an amazing journey that I've been on. And this is just really this kind of second wind that I was given in this journey of life. And it was just like this power in vitality to just ignite and do all that I was meant to be and do. So after my heart transplant, I set out and I said, what can I do to really help humanity understand the power of taking good care of yourself? Having loving connections, having deep meaning and purpose in life, eating a healthy diet, moving your body regularly, getting good sleep. But really, at the hallmark of all, it's just that love, just being kind and non-judgmental of your own thoughts and your thoughts of others. And that's what this has been all about. So I set out to run a marathon on my 1-year heart transplant anniversary. And I started off slow. I did a 5K at my 3-month post-transplant window. I climbed a mountain 4 months post-transplant. I did a half marathon about 8 months post-transplant, and I ran a full marathon on my 1-year heart transplant anniversary in honor of my patients. So it's been just such a gift to be on this journey of life. And I guess I would say that my goal in life is really to help to move patients beyond hope to knowing that you too, though all of our journeys are very different, but you too can attain your vitality during this time. And I am a believer in conventional cancer therapy. And even though it did hurt my heart in the way it did, I needed it to eradicate the cancer in my body. And I was able to use the pillars of lifestyle medicine to keep me well, through this time. And here I am today. I think, I don't know. I don't think there's many people on earth that have more vitality than I do. If there is anyone, I've never met them.
Yep.
So
I agree.
so
I agree. You're like the Energizer bunny.
energy. Yeah. I do need to work on my sleep. I just have so much energy. I just wish I didn't have to sleep. That sounds awful to say that, but I mean, we all are able to kind of share our weaknesses. But yeah, I just have too much living to do, I would say.
I wish I was, were you like this even before all this?
Hmm. I
I,
don't, to a level, my college friends and stuff say, yeah, you've always been like this, but I didn't have the level of gratefulness for it. I'm so grateful for my life. I think, that moves us from a place of deficit to abundance, just gratitude. And you read about that. Like, when you wake up in the morning, just reflect on something that you're grateful for, just one little thing. I also like to reflect on one thing I want to do better each day too. Like, how can it be better? What did I do today that wasn't maybe as good as I would like for it to be? Every opportunity in life is an opportunity for growth. And I think that's just, I don't like to judge myself. It's not that I feel inadequate necessarily, but I want to, if I'm given this chance, the second, third, fourth chance to be alive, I want to make sure that I do the best I can to be there for others. And just again, through that lens of love, and just always remembering not to judge self, just like we work so hard not to judge others, but don't judge yourself either. Don't judge those thoughts. We're all entitled to moments of weakness, we're human.
what was more difficult, the cancer treatment or going through the heart transplant?
The heart failure was the most difficult, because it was chronic disease. Cancer for me, honestly, it was really hard is when I thought I had asthma, with that inhaler. I was like, oh my gosh. And I know, Chef AJ, you have this. I think of you because I know you have those symptoms, and this is so hard for you. We have to help cancer patients get better first with treatment. And once we start to get rid of the cancer, then you start to get that quality of life back again, right? But it's when you're stuck in that in-between phase of the disease kind of controlling our body, it's hard to have clarity. I'm on the other end of it now, right? But there were moments when I wrestled with it.
It's very sad that they thought that it was all in your head. How long did it take for them when you started first complaining of respiratory problems for them to take you seriously and do a chest x-ray?
Yeah. And they very long. It was, I should say very long. It's a very aggressive tumor, but I think it was kind of on the realm of 6 to 8 weeks. And it's a rapidly growing tumor, so it's just really a shame. And it's such a big learning lesson for doctors. I've never known a doctor that would be so negligent. I think it's because I look so healthy, and doctors are in a hurry. And so this is a huge shout out for patients. If it doesn't seem right, advocate for yourself. If your doctor's not listening, say, hey, listen to me. Please look me in the eyes that something is not right. I need you to help me figure out what's wrong. But I had a medical student with me this week. And I had a resident with me this week as well. I am one of the directors for our lifestyle medicine residency curriculum. We have 55 residents across the enterprise at Mayo Clinic who are very, very interested in this field of lifestyle medicine, and so exciting. But what I shared with her is I said, she was a little nervous because her next rotation is ICU in the critical care unit. I said, two things. Number one, listen to the patient because the patient has the wisdom to help you bridge the knowledge you're going to need. And number two, listen to the nurses. Because if you can't get it from the patient, the nurses will have the knowing, but the patient and the nurses, wow, that's your source of knowledge right there. But the patient has the answer always.
Who took those pictures of you when you were after you had the heart transplant? Because you couldn't have known that one day you were going to be doing a PowerPoint and
Yeah, my mom. So my mom was my caregiver during my heart transplant. And so I had told her no pictures, no pictures. And so she's like, I was so scared to take pictures. And now I'm happy she did. I haven't really shared those up until more recently, but it's pretty powerful to see like the power of the human spirit to come through that significant level of illness. It's just
how
incredible.
long was it until you woke up from the heart transplant? Because that picture was the most profound, I think, in the whole PowerPoint, the one before you were sitting up.
Yeah. So it was about 4 days.
I mean I mean the whole story is just a miracle.
I am a miracle. How cool is that?
I
You are
know.
too.
And let's just change your name to Miracle. I mean, I'm serious. So there's a question from a live viewer for advice for those of us who aren't at the level of embracing life like you are with such joy and hope, but who want to get there. Do you have any advice for those people?
Yeah. I would start small, right? I would start with little things. Like, what's one thing, like I said, you're grateful for? I think we just start there. I have relatives and family members that kind of struggle with happiness and joy, and happiness is going to come and go. Joy is going to come and go. So I think first in life, we have to seek meaning. What is it in life that gives us meaning? When we wake up in the morning, why do we want to wake up? We all fight to live, right? We probably need to work harder at dying, honestly, because dying is as soon as you're faced with your mortality, all of a sudden you realize what really is important in life. So it's a hard question. And again, I just feel so grateful and almost not guilty, but so grateful that I've been given this position in life to have had this happiness early on, because I see my patients struggling, and we all have our own adversities. But I think my adversity in many ways is much more minor in comparison to someone that struggles from depression or from anxiety or from some of these psychological overtones that are really hard to escape from. And, so it's been interesting leading up to my heart transplant. One of my good friends is a psychiatrist and said to me, Dawn, do you even want a transplant? I'm thinking, what? I don't have a choice, right? And he went on to say, well, aren't you scared your personality is going to change? And I thought, well, that's wonderful. Of course, I'm kind of scared, but I was trying not to think about that. And I've never had anxiety until my heart transplant. I've had a few episodes of anxiety, and I think it's in part, maybe part of what my donor had experienced in her life. I'm not sure, but I'm happy I've experienced that because it is really tough. And it happens to me when I'm driving over bridges. And so I don't really know how my donor died, but every once in a while when I go over a bridge, I really struggle. It's really a very fearful, very, very, very fearful thing for me. And so I've been able to experience some anxiety that I've had to work through since my transplant. It's been more recent, which is very interesting. And so I really lean in on God. And for me, that's my place. I pray. And I just ask for understanding. And I try not to judge myself. I try not to compare myself to others who perhaps don't have that. I think that's very important. Beautiful question.
So you needed the radiation, and that is what fried your heart, that required you to have a heart transplant, right?
Right. So keep this in mind. So when I had radiation, my tumor was wrapped around my heart. So the
There
radiation
was
had to go right there. I mean, that's where it was targeting,
so
was
there was
the
like
heart.
so you kind of knew going in this was a potential side effect because there was no way to radiate it without affecting your
Yep.
heart.
Precisely. And the other thing is, women, they never in a million years thought I would be able to have a baby. I wasn't even having menstrual periods and I got pregnant. I mean, it's just like a miracle. Like, what a gift that I had this child. But that puts so much strain on my heart. Pregnancy is a lot of strain on the heart. Your blood volume multiplies and all these things. So the childbirth for me was so difficult. And I remember thinking, oh my goodness, every woman that has a baby deserves a cape. This is a tough thing. It's not a heart failure. I just didn't know it. My heart wasn't even working at the time I gave birth to my daughter. But
Funny. Oh my.
yeah. So what a gift. But yeah, it was mainly probably because of the radiation. I had many forms of heart failure. It was kind of interesting how my heart evolved. So the first form of heart failure I had truly was from the chemo. But I seem to have gotten better from that first kind of evolution of my heart failure that really caused the ejection fraction to go down. And then as that part got better, the scarring from my heart started causing these fatal arrhythmias and some valvular issues. So it's like, oh man, I kind of got like this double whammy, kind of like this bimodal heart failure issue, but there were kind of multiple reasons why my heart wasn't working. And we've learned, now there's this whole field of medicine called cardio-oncology. And that's exactly what cardio-oncology is about, is the study of heart health during and after cancer treatment. And so now there's a lot of investigative therapies and modalities about how can we help to protect the heart. So it's important.
Well, that's why, you've had all the modalities. You've had surgery, you've had chemo, you've had radiation. I don't know if you've had other things like immunotherapy, but I'm scared to have radiation because my tumor is less than 2 millimeters from my heart, and I don't see how they're going to get the tumor without having some fallout with the heart.
Yeah, you're right. It's always a risk. I guess what I do believe in medicine is you have to go after the bigger threat. And I feel that the bigger threat right now is cancer. And that is and nowadays we're so much better at shielding the radiation. There's different inspiratory efforts they can do. We have proton beam for some patients. I mean, these were not things we knew about back in the day when I did radiation. It was more just widespread, boom, coming at you. So nowadays we've learned the hard way, and that's what medicine is all about. It's not perfect. But man, I'm so grateful that I had those treatments because I am alive, but I'm also grateful that medicine has refined the therapy to be less toxic. We know we can't just be, so without keeping in mind the collateral damage aspect. So I believe that they talk to you. Is it proton therapy
Well,
that
the
they would
thing
use?
is the problem is now that I have metastases, the kind of radiation that I would have got, which is the newest one at Stanford called Reflexion, I'm not eligible for. So it's like I actually have an appointment with one of the top radiation oncologists at UCSD on Tuesday to decide if I do get it, what's better, photon or proton.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know for sure what I'm doing. All I know, and I'm not trying to be vague with people, is just that we haven't made any final decisions. But I did get my histology report yesterday, and I don't know what any of this means other than it said that my tumor was very, very promising. It had an 85, whatever that means, percent to have immunotherapy.
Amazing. Well, this is a huge shout out for whole food plant-based nutrition with immunotherapy. So, the early studies with immunotherapy were done in melanoma, and they saw that patients with the more enhanced gut microbiome responded more to immunotherapy. Immunotherapy is targeting the immune system to go after the cancer. And so how amazing is that? We're in a totally new era of cancer treatment. It is just phenomenal to see the cancers that I once upon a time saw patients not have the opportunity to be treated effectively. Now, all of a sudden, having these effective treatments and the PET scans all of a sudden start showing complete resolution of the cancer. It's just so enlightening. But we know again from these melanoma studies that people with a more enhanced gut microbiome respond better to immunotherapy. And so, what is the best way to enhance the gut microbiome? A lot of people think, okay, let's just take a probiotic. Well, no. The best way to enhance and arm the gut microbiome is by a diverse diet. The American Gut Project showed us that 10 or less diverse plant foods a week versus 30 or more plant foods a week, 30 or more enhance the gut microbiome. If you go 50 to 70, that enhances the gut microbiome even more. Now that sounds like a ton, but that's, vegetables, fruits, whole grains, legumes, including soy. Soy is very healthy for you. Nuts and seeds and spices, and so it's so easy to get at least 30 different sorts of plant foods and include fermented foods as part of that. So, really all people should really try to have a diverse diet, but especially those patients on immunotherapy. So I'm really happy that this is the path that they're going to be opening up to you. I see that patients tolerate it really well. And also what I see is the immune system is more aligned favorably, right? You don't want the immune system with immunotherapy to be overly aggressive. You want it to be properly aggressive. And then that way you don't have the immune system acting out against other organs. So I really am a big advocate towards whole food plant-based nutrition during immunotherapy. We have a very exciting study at Mayo Clinic I've been trying to get off the ground. It still needs funding, but to look at this, to look at the power of a whole food plant-only diet during chemoimmunotherapy to show that not only are we improving the treatment response, but also that we're improving treatment outcomes, of course, as well as quality of life. We're maintaining more muscle mass. We've seen a recent study that was out of India looking at whole food plant-based nutrition that was high in plant protein, showing us that among breast cancer patients, they had less fatigue on the plant-based diet, and they actually maintained muscle mass more than those on a standard diet. So we have plenty of data to show us that this whole food plant-based nutrition is the diet to be on during and after chemotherapy, both from a quality of life standpoint, as well as suggested enhancement metabolically, as well as this suggested immunotherapy response.
Thank you. Do you still have to get regular either CAT scans or PET scans, or how often are you followed up?
That's an awesome question. So we finally stopped because my PET scans continue to be positive. They always showed a little bit of active cancer. That seems pretty unsettling, right? So finally we said, why are we doing these? We're not going to do anything about it. So until I have symptoms, let's not do anything. And not too long ago, there's always these little bits of scares. I had a cutaneous lesion. It were these nodules that were on my skin. This was last year. And they couldn't figure out what it was, so they biopsied it. And sure enough, it was a suggested, what they call cutaneous manifestation of a possible underlying malignancy. Meaning, could this be the skin telling us that there's something going on inside our body? But, my answer back to them was, man, I feel so good. What are we going to do? We're not going to do anything about it. So let's just keep going the course. And if I get any symptoms, we'll then address it. But I'm very respectful of what I need to do for my treatments. I get regular heart biopsies. Believe it or not, if you have a heart transplant, you have to do heart biopsies. I'm on immunosuppression. I'm on double immunosuppression, actually, from my heart transplant. I did go into rejection after my heart transplant following the COVID vaccine, actually. This isn't to give a thumbs down to the COVID vaccine. It's just in high-risk patients, these sorts of things can happen. I think COVID would have been a high-risk situation too. So got the vaccine, it caused some complications of my heart. So now I have to be on double immunosuppressives as a result of that.
Are you writing a book? And what do you want to call it? My Miracle Life?
I need a title. So I love that. I've been asked to write a book. I do want to write a book, and I think I'm going to start working on it this year. So Dr. Will Boskowitz, we all know Fiber Fuel, Dr. Will, he's so amazing. So he's helping me. He's giving me some connections with some of the folks that helped him with getting his book published. So I'm really going to be working on that over the next coming months.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely amazing. Now, I found you, I went to the website and I was able to make an appointment. Is that still the case? Can anyone see you? And how does that work? And most of your work is done on Zoom, right?
Yeah, 100% of what I do is on Zoom because I do live a pretty busy practice traveling with doing different talks. So I can engage oncologists and medical providers about the importance of lifestyle medicine in the setting of cancer treatment. I do telehealth. If patients live in Florida, insurance covers for that telehealth visit to be covered 100% as long as your insurance is covered at Mayo Clinic, which we do take the majority of commercial payers, including Medicare. But you would want to call Mayo Clinic to make sure it's covered. If you live out of state and you've never been seen at Mayo Clinic, that becomes a little bit more tricky. Sometimes insurance doesn't cover that, depending on your insurance plan. So usually you have to be visiting Florida for me to do the telehealth visit. I've had patients say, hey, we're going to be visiting Florida. We're going to be on the west coast of Florida during these dates. And they can just do their telehealth visit with me while they're visiting Florida. They don't have to necessarily come in to see me at Mayo Clinic, but they need to be in Florida at that time. So some patients will just call and say, yeah, I'm going to be in Florida during these weeks. Can we set up a telehealth visit then? I know I have a really long wait list. That breaks my heart to know that there's such a wait list. And so that's why I'm really working hard to train more doctors in this space. But I do try to have a pretty strong social media presence in terms of these different opportunities to engage with audiences to help guide them.
Do most of the people that come to you, are they already either plant-based or plant curious?
Oh yeah, it's so exciting. My patients thrive. I have so many miracle stories. I think my story is exciting, I guess. Patients have far more exciting stories, so I would say. My patients inspire me every single day. All of my patients are plant curious. It is the first question I ask the patient, what are your goals for me? Do you know why your doctor sent you to me? In the past year, I've only had one woman that I did not talk about nutrition with her because she had had so many other major traumas that had happened. In addition to her cancer, her mom actually died in one of the recent hurricanes in Florida. So if you can imagine, discussing whole food plant-based nutrition wasn't her priority. Really, quite honestly, living wasn't really her priority. So we focused on more important things for that visit. Again, this is about meeting the patient where they're at, what's going to suit the patient best at that time. And for that conversation for her, even though she was eating a very unhealthy diet and her body mass index was not favorable, me pushing a whole food plant-based prescriptive diet on her would have been more trauma and stress. So instead, I kind of just met her, in the arms of love. And we talked about maybe a few things that she could do to just help her to embrace her own acceptance is what we worked on. So it's not always the nutrition that we talk about. We just really focus on finding harmony in life as where they're at right now.
I mean, I would give anything to find a doctor, especially an oncologist with like you. It's just I'm okay most of the time, except when I see them, and then I go into a depression for like days because it's just so unpleasant, you know. I don't know what to tell you. It's
Well,
hard.
Chef AJ, you're right. I know. I mean, and listen, they did the same thing to me when they came in and said, you have three. It's like they feel obligated to say you have 3 months to live. You have this. And I tell my patients, listen, if you don't want to hear those numbers, just ask them not to share that with you. You know, you're
No, I
not a number.
don't. I don't. I leave the room. I don't. I mean, I don't know what the numbers are. All I know is, I'm alive 2.5 years later and I've not done anything yet. So I'm just looking at that. Oh, so Jerry's giving a suggested title for your book,
Oh,
Musallem's Miracle Journey of Hope and Life by Dr. Dawn Mussallem.
oh, I love that. Thank you, Jerry.
Yep. If somebody's asking if you've spoken at the Plantrician Conference.
I have not actually yet. I do have a lot of mutual friends with that group. So I would love to one of these years.
Well, do you want me to send this to Dr. Stoll as soon as we're off? I mean, I don't know why you haven't.
Sure. You know, it's so funny for 2025. I think my speaking engagements are completely full. Mayo Clinic only gives me so many days to speak, but I always figure out a way because I love to spread the word. And, coming from the voice of a patient, as well as seeing the miraculous stories I've seen with my patients, and the fact that the science is so exciting. I'm also the physician for Blue Zones here in Jacksonville. And so we have a really exciting study getting ready to be started there. I'm a co-investigator with Dr. Fang Zhang at Tufts University. So we're looking at implementing whole food plant-based nutrition for 200 cancer survivors in food insecure zip codes within the Blue Zones Jacksonville area. I have more exciting news too. So I got approved for the farm project at Mayo Clinic. So we are going to be having a regenerative farm at Mayo Clinic. We're doing I'm medical director for employee well-being at Mayo Clinic as well. So we have a lot of initiatives centered around whole food plant-based nutrition for our staff. I'm doing some work with different novel food development, global food, with novel proteins like mycoprotein, proteins from mushroom mainly. So plant-derived proteins from biomass fermentation. So a lot of really exciting work. So yeah, I'm just so happy to be alive and have the momentum and the empowerment and the advocacy work that you've done, Chef AJ, to make this possible for me. So thank you so much.
Oh my God, it's my pleasure. Did I hear you say that you were treated at City of Hope?
I was.
Okay, because you got to tell me a little bit about that because I've been submitted for clinical trials at City of Hope, UCSF, Stanford, and MD Anderson. And so far, I haven't been to any of them, but the best phone experience has been City of Hope because even just with the people that aren't doctors that are just doing intakes, they just genuinely seem really very caring there.
Well, they sure were. And they were really supportive of me using integrative therapies during my cancer treatment. And this was in 2000. So imagine back then, I mean, no one was really accepting of integrative therapies back then. And they were the ones that brought the bicycle into my room. They had the bicycle waiting for me at the nurse's station. I mean, they just knew how to support me. They supported me being in medical school. So they allowed my professors to bring tests to me in the hospital so I could take my tests. They would fax my doctors back my test results so they could score them. So it was just amazing. So I had a beautiful experience with the City of Hope. And I couldn't imagine doing my treatment anywhere else. I felt so supported.
Yeah, it sounds amazing. I have one more question for you that I've been asking everyone during this series. And it's really sort of a silly question at this point because your whole presentation was about this. But specifically, what message of hope would you share with somebody that's currently facing a cancer diagnosis?
That's so beautiful, and when it comes to hope, I would just trust, and just stay in the present moment for as much as you can. I mean, I know we hear that a lot, but we can only control what we control in the now, and that's really what I would lean in on is just control what you can control. Be present in the now, love your loved ones, and hire the doctors that you trust so that you can take care of yourself. And that way you can be less worried about all the nuances of the disease. For me, both with cancer and heart failure, I really stayed away from knowing too much about my diagnosis, which sounds completely opposite of what you would think a doctor would say, but I really didn't want to get too busy with that. I wanted to hire doctors that could do it so I could live my own life. I wanted to keep my own autonomy and let them be my doctor. So I hired good doctors. That's what gave me hope. And I really actually asked my oncologist, I kind of felt like the word hope almost had this connotation of maybe non-hope too. So I love to take this from hope to knowing that we're going to be okay. Like, we're on this journey of life together, and it's all for a very divine reason. And so just to honor and respect that, and just to love yourself, be forgiving and be nurturing.
And like you said earlier, be grateful.
Oh, so important. It gives me chills. Yes.
Man, I just got to watch this every day when I wake up. Why don't you do like a daily something every morning for all of us? I know you probably don't have time, but just even an Instagram live, like right when everybody wakes up.
You're precious. I feel the same way about you. So thank you. I don't feel that. I feel sometimes like my voice is so, it's so irritating. Trying to irritate the world more than anything. But thank you. And Chef AJ, I feel the same about you. I just feel so inspired by your journey. And I'm so sorry you're going through this hard time. But oh my gosh, the empowerment you're providing for so many people. And just by opening up your vulnerability to the world, thank you for doing that. And more people need to do that. And we cannot judge. Thank God you took care of your body the way you did for all these years. And look at you. No one would know that you have been sick a day in your life. And I'm sorry that you've had to go through this internal suffering on your own. And I'm so happy now you're opening up your story to all of us, because I believe in the power of prayer. And it's so important for us to be able to pray for you and to send you those good well wishes every single day.
Oh my God. I totally believe in it. I mean, because I never, this thing's never comes out of my hand when I'm scared. So anyway, I don't know how people get through it otherwise, but thank you so much for just really starting the day off in a very meaningful and inspiring way.
Thank you, Chef AJ. Thank you, everyone. It was so nice to be here.
Well, it was such a pleasure. And thanks all of you for watching day 4 of Thriving in the Face of Cancer. I want you to know, and if you don't believe it, watch this again, that wherever you are in your cancer journey, as long as you're still breathing, I believe there is still hope and that you too can thrive even in the face of cancer. Please tune in tomorrow at 11 a.m. Pacific time for day 5 of Thriving in the Face of Cancer with Mark Velez. He works at the Sutter Roseville Institute for Health and Healing as a licensed acupuncturist, and he's helped me tremendously on my healing journey. I'm curious, I should have asked you this before, but did you ever do any other modalities? Because I couldn't get an oncologist, so I was just trying everything. And I got to tell you, it was so helpful to my nervous system and my anxiety. And I'm sure it also helped my immune system getting these regular acupuncture treatments.
I am a big believer of acupuncture. I particularly love 5 elements acupuncture. So when I started the integrative program at Mayo Clinic, how it was set up is right within our breast cancer center. Oncology would see the patients, surgery would see the patients. I would see my patients, the integrative oncology, lifestyle oncology, realm. And then right next to me, the acupuncturists were, and we had a mind body therapist all in the same hallway. So yes, at Mayo Clinic, we have acupuncturists on staff, and we are big supporters and believers. And when I wrote the guidelines as a co-author for the American Society of Clinical Oncology, integrative therapies during and after breast cancer, the evidence base to support acupuncture for cancer patients is substantial for overall quality of life, but for that, even that feeling of being overwhelmed, for anxiety, for depression. And then when I say overall quality of life, it's everything from fatigue to sleep to neuropathy to pain. There's some studies that suggest that doing the acupuncture before you even start the chemotherapy and during, perhaps it can reduce the neuropathy. So I'm just such a believer. And then, of course, for women's health, particularly in my population of breast cancer patients that have a lot of the hormone deprivation, it can really help a lot of those hormone deprivation symptoms as well. So I'm such an advocate for acupuncture, a lot of the other alternative modalities of healing. Look at these alternative modalities. You first want to say, is there any harm? Can this hurt me? No, acupuncture can't hurt you. Can supplements hurt you? Can some of these other more maybe less evidence-based therapies hurt you? If there's any opportunity for harm, you probably want to step away from it, right? But for these modalities like acupuncture, mind-body therapies, I would lean in fully.
Yeah, thanks. I'm so glad I asked you about it. I'm sure Mark will appreciate your kind words about it. Thanks again, Dr. Dawn, and go out and run some more marathons.